Hello and welcome to Missouri Legislative Update. This month we bring you our program from the Missouri State Museum, located on the first floor of the state capitol. In today's show, we take a look at the work being done by several of the General Assembly's interim committees. I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting from the Missouri House of Representatives.
And reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Jennifer Yapel. Earlier this month in communities all across the state, citizens held special events to honor our country's heroes. While Missourians participated in these Veterans Day events, we examined legislation passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor during the 2013 session that provides services for those who have fought and continue to sacrifice in order to ensure freedom shared and enjoyed by all in the Show Me state.
You never can really pay back the debt to these folks who've served our country.
Lawmakers recognize the importance of higher education, and with the passage of Senate Bill 106, sponsored by Senator Dan Brown of Rolla, colleges and universities must now give credit for courses as part of a student's military service.
And I think that University of Missouri, Central Missouri State, and some of the universities have done a really good job being out ahead of this and encouraging active duty military and post-military to continue their education.
The legislation also gives certain members of the armed forces the opportunity to keep their professional health-related licenses or certificates while on active duty, and lets military members apply their service toward qualifications to receive a professional license or certificate.
We've had many of the active duty military that are certainly qualified to be licensed in healthcare areas, and we certainly are interested in seeing them be able to utilize that and keep them in Missouri.
Finally, Senate Bill 106 establishes child custody and visitation rights of deploying military parents and permits the display of the Honor and Remember flag at state buildings and state parks. This flag recognizes and honors fallen members of the U.S. Armed Forces. Legislation handled by Senator Brown in the upper chamber allows the Missouri State Treasurer to make information available to the public regarding military medals in its possession in order to help identify original medal recipients, their heirs, or their beneficiaries. Another bill relating to military in the state, sponsored by Senator Will Krause of Lee Summit, gives those who receive an honorable or general discharge from the military Missouri resident status in order to pay in-state tuition at one of the Show Me State's public higher education institutions.
Example would be a situation where somebody was at Whiteman Mechanic on the B2, not a resident of Missouri, gets out, decides he wants to go to UCM. This would allow him to pay in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition if he was not a resident of Missouri prior to being in the military.
While Minority Floor Leader Jolie Justice of Kansas City agrees with what the bill sponsor is setting out to do in the bill, she shares her concern with her colleagues during debate.
We could potentially have people across the country, as they are discharged, decide, I'm going to take advantage of the in-state tuition in Missouri. I'm going to fly to Missouri. I'm going to get an apartment. Maybe I'll get a post office box. Maybe I won't even get an apartment. I'm going to get my in-state tuition, and then I'm going to go back to my home state and go to work there.
Senator Paul Lavoda shares his support of the bill.
But I think this opportunity to improve their quality of life, and then also get a workforce that is skilled, that is dedicated. I think it's a really unique idea.
Members of the General Assembly maintain their commitment toward our state's military and veterans, and we'll show you how lawmakers continue to work on behalf of these servicemen and women, both past and present, during the upcoming 2014 session. Meanwhile, some of the committees that have met this interim have concluded their missions ahead of schedule. Senate Communications correspondent Dean Morgan has an update on one of these panels.
The Joint Committee on Solid Waste Management District Operations held its final regular hearing for the interim on November 7th. The group's chair, Senator Wayne Wallingford of Cape Girardeau, says the panel has spent the past few months taking testimony and will next prepare a report for the full Missouri General Assembly.
During the testimony that we've had, that we found out that we're not comparing apples to apples, and that's certainly not fair for anyone looking at the programs and certainly not fair for the people submitting those
Senator Jason Holzman of Kansas City stresses committee members will have to take all of the different regions of Missouri into account when putting together the report, which is due by December 31st.
First off, we've learned that not everybody is the same. So the Jackson County and St. Louis County and some of the smaller districts have different challenges and different infrastructure abilities. So I think that we just need to recognize that there may not be just a one solution for all the districts.
The Committee on Solid Waste Management District Operations was put in place as a result of House Bill 28, which was passed by lawmakers and signed into law by the governor earlier this year. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Dean Morgan.
Lawmakers from the House Interim Committee on Medicaid Transformation have had a busy interim as they have learned the ins and outs of the state's complicated Medicaid system. In a recent meeting, lawmakers set out to discuss different types of medical coverage, but everything changed with one letter from the second floor.
I spoke with Senator Romine.
Members of the House Interim Committee on Medicaid Transformation started their final scheduled hearing discussing an upcoming joint meeting with their Senate counterparts and the governor. But those plans vanished during the afternoon when they received a letter from the governor canceling the upcoming meeting. In his letter, the governor claimed lawmakers had reneged on their agreement for a constructive dialogue.
We've agreed to meet. We've agreed to meet here where legislative committees have always met, and to do it in a way that is the same structure that legislative committees follow when they meet. Now, the governor has said no to that meeting.
Members of the House and Senate Committees on Medicaid Transformation aim to meet with the governor in a committee setting with hopes of having a productive dialogue. But the governor wanted to meet with both committees outside of the building and on his own terms. However, not everyone on the committee is upset with the governor. The committee's ranking Democrat claims certain members of the committee are at fault for the current situation.
I was hoping that we would have an opportunity to have a conversation with the governor. I think the letter that was sent to the governor was a little intimidating, made it seem more of an inquisition as opposed to, I think the governor wanted to have an open conversation with both committees, and it's unfortunate that we're not going to get to do that.
Currently, there are no scheduled plans for the committee to meet with the governor to discuss any changes to the state's Medicaid system. The committee now begins the process of drafting a report to present to the legislature, a report which will not contain any big-ticket recommendations.
I don't think there is enough consensus on this committee on either reform models or the big E question for the committee to make a recommendation on either the exact reforms or the big E.
Instead, the report will include a summary of the committee's findings. The committee aims to produce its report before the start of the 2014 legislative session. After the break, one of the state's top newsmakers sits down with a member of the Missouri Senate to talk about the future of health care in Missouri. That's after these messages on Missouri Legislative Update.
My parents say I have to be home right after work. That's so gay. Totally gay.
That is so Emma and Julia. Imagine if who you are were used as an insult. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
Welcome to Capital Dialogue segment of the program today. We're going to be talking about one of the key issues for the 2014 legislative session. We're recording this just a few feet from the floor of the state Senate, and in a couple of months the state Senate will be back in session and that floor will hum with activity and passion and sometimes even heat. And one of the issues that is sure to generate a lot of all of that will be Medicaid. Medicaid reform, Medicaid expansion. They've been hot topics for the last couple of years in the Missouri Capitol, and 2014 is going to be one of the major issues. The state Senate has had a committee operating between legislative sessions looking into this issue, taking hours and hours of testimony. The chairman of that committee is Senator Gary Romine, who is from Farmington. We're going to spend some time with him in this segment of our program today. Senator, give me an idea, if you can even calculate it, how many hours you have spent during your supposed vacation time away from the Capitol on this issue.
You know, I would not even want to hazard a guess on that. I know it's been very time-consuming between reading drafts and reading reports and reading some research from my chief of staff and what he's provided, and then preparing for our time to be up here in Jeff City. It's been quite extensive hours, but been very productive hours.
Most folks see a bill come out in the regular part of the legislative session. They know that you folks are in business during certain days of the week during a legislative session. that a lot of people probably don't realize that there's weeks or months of preparation behind some of these major bills, and you've just been through that with your committee.
The interim committee has been going since June, and so we've had to digest a lot of testimony, a lot of, again, research papers to make sure that we're on track to provide the best Medicaid program we can for the state.
We're speaking to you just minutes after you wrapped up the final committee meeting and you're working on a final report. How does your final report translate into legislation that will be introduced for the January session?
We'll take and evaluate the final report and all the key components of it, and then take a look real close of what statutes may have to be modified to be able to accept and adopt those recommendations that are coming from the legislative body or the senators that served on this committee.
And just because something is not in the report doesn't mean that somebody can't introduce a bill on that
No,
topic.
this is just a guidepost or starting. It gives us some credentials on why some of the recommendations or why some of the legislation needs to be transacted.
You took a lot of testimony from people on Medicaid expansion.
Correct.
Some on Medicaid reform. Your final committee report is going to be heavy on reform, very light on expansion. How did that work out that way?
Well, our committee was charged with reform and transformation. That was our main guide. We opened it up to public testimony. We did not try to control what that public testimony was going to be. And obviously, when the day was over, a majority of that public testimony was a desire to see expansion, primarily for the extra dollars that it would bring to Missouri from the federal government. That being said, there was no way, as chairman, I felt comfortable in cutting anybody off. It was public testimony, and so we accepted it. We realized that our charge was the reform and transformation, so our other hearings were set up from an economic standpoint. I'm fortunate to have a chief of staff that's an economics major, and I'm a business major, and we decided to approach Medicaid from a business model. And so our next hearing was the demand side and then the supply side. And then we have professionals that have been through the process in other states, helping them transform their Medicaid program in another hearing. So we took a very business and pragmatic approach to evaluating the current Medicaid program and how it could look and how it does look in other states.
You mentioned a very key word here, and that's transformation. I think a lot of people think in terms of expansion, but your committee had transformation in its title.
Correct.
Can we talk a little bit about the difference between transformation and expansion? Because I think a lot of folks who testified assumed expansion was part of your discussion, but transformation is the key word.
Transformation means that we're looking at transforming an antiquated program in a lot of ways. Just for example, the spin down rate's been at the same rate since 1968, which leaves a lot of seniors and fixed income folks in a tough situation. So there's various variables like that need to be evaluated and considered. There's new forms of presenting Medicaid, or managing Medicaid, managed care, accountable care organizations, those types of operations. We've had managed care in 54 counties in the state as a pilot program. It's been going on for several years, so it's time to decide whether or not it was efficient for the state. And from our hearings and research, it was effective for the state, and we feel like it's time to expand it, transform it to the rest of the state. So we've got a lot to do in just creating a solvent and solid Medicaid program for our current populations before we even consider any changes in eligibility for future recipients.
Let's talk for just a second about the spend down, because there are some people who haven't had to go through this experience either for themselves or an elderly family member, or there are some people who have gone through it or are going through it now. How would this change? Can you give me an idea of what the committee envisions that direction being?
Well, when you have a car breakdown or have a major repair to the house, a water heater goes out, and $999, which is what it was, is just not a sufficient amount of money. And so we've raised it to $2,000 for a single, $4,000 for a couple, to give them a little bit more cushion in their assets. That spend down of it basically means that they've got to have less than that to be able to qualify for supplemental services from the state to pay for their medical needs. And so we need to raise that limit so that they're not requiring to get rid of their assets to be able to afford health care.
In your final meeting, the Democratic members walked out for a little while. Why was that?
Very disappointing. They were very strong, very opinionated about expansion being part of the report. And we were not charged with that responsibility. Now, we made sure that the report had all the testimony in there from the public hearings, about the desire to see expansion happen. But as stated in our report, it was very important that before we ever have any dialogue about expansion, we have to make sure we have a strong, current, up-to-date, solvent Medicaid program. And then if we have funds that we're saving and we're doing a more efficient job with, and we can look at eligibility requirements and bring on some of those folks, then there's a time for that discussion. But until then, we've got to focus on the real job at hand, and that's to make the most efficient Medicaid program possible.
Those of us who've covered the Medicaid issue for a long, long time here know that this is a program that can eat the budget.
Very quickly.
And so what in your committee's recommendations will control that growth of the program?
Well, we think with managed care and accountable care organizations is what our recommendations are coming down to, that emergency room use is abused, which is a very costly form of health care. We think that if folks are under a managed care where they take their medicines on a more timely basis, that they're less likely to show up in the hospital from diabetes reoccurrence or some other issues like that. So it's efficiency and better serving the needs of the consumer that we think will be the biggest savings with these programs.
One of the criticisms I've heard from some of the Democrats is that this report includes a lot of things that had little or no input during the committee process and excludes a lot of stuff that had a lot of ideas that were brought before the committee. Is that a fair criticism?
No, the majority of the points that we covered today were parts of the testimony. There was a couple of items that were brought up that were fringes, but as the committee chair, it was my responsibility to get debate on that, and we took a vote, and the items that were fringe or felt like that had a tangible effect to Medicaid, the committee voted to add to the recommendations, and we did. So we made sure that each issue was debated on its own merits.
Some folks who have been with Medicaid for some time will remember several years ago during the Blunt administration when the eligibility was changed, a lot of people suddenly were no longer part of the program. Does your report recommend any eligibility changes?
Eligibility changes need to be evaluated, but we're looking for opportunities to make it more, I guess, consumer friendly in that it does take care of the folks that are in need. During the Blunt administration, we were under a budget crisis, very few funds available to meet the needs. And again, one of the things that we want to do with this Medicaid program is make sure we're solvent. We do not want to be in a position where the program doesn't take care of those that really need to be taken care of under its program. And so the eligibility requirements we're looking at is only to make ourselves more efficient, more effective, and make sure we're truly taking care of the patients or the consumers that really need the services.
Your party controls the Senate and the House on a basis, basically 2-1. Would that, in your view, probably eliminate any possibility of a Medicaid expansion during the 2014 legislative session? Given what you've just been through with your committee, would you see that expansion, which the Democrats favor, has any chance at all?
Expansion is a toxic word. So we may have to look at eligibility requirements, I think is more of the term that we need to look at, and how are we going to have a donut hole of folks that are left with no coverage at all? And that would be a poor place for our citizens in this state to be in, and we may have to look at that. We also have to look at the fact that approximately $3.5 to $4 billion is going to be not coming to Missouri's economy from the federal government with the Medicare cuts, the dish payment cuts, so on and so forth. It's just frustrating that the only way we can get some of those monies back is to follow a strict order of expansion. So I think our body is going to look very hard at ways to, other states have received waivers, we're going to look at ways to continue to receive those federal support dollars, but we want to do it in a way that really makes sense for Missouri.
After the break, Bob Priddy continues his discussion on Medicaid reform with State Senator Joseph Keaveny of St. Louis. Stay tuned.
For those dealing with the struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. Visit aarp.org/caregiving for advice and support.
Senator Joseph Keaveny is the senior Democrat on the committee that has been spending the last several months looking at Medicaid reform and expansion. The committee has decided what it's going to put into its final report, and you Democrats are not real happy about some of this.
No, today was a very hard day.
Tell me what your biggest disappointment is after all of this work.
I mean, we've come back and forth to the Capitol probably every month to take public testimony. And the end product of this report, we excluded the most testimony that we heard, and we inserted items that there was no public testimony on whatsoever. So it really comes to question, why even bother to have public testimony on these?
Okay, from your standpoint then, let's kind of walk through this. What was included on which there was little or no testimony? The
tort reform piece, to put caps, instill caps back on medical malpractice. So, and they were talking $350,000. So that passed, and that's going to be included in the report. We heard absolutely no testimony on that.
We have had a court hearing, a court ruling on caps on damages. Is this going to play negatively on that issue, do you think?
Well, I think that's their attempt. Their attempt is to reinstate the caps that the court overruled as a way of passing this report out. In my mind, this report's more just a symbolism than anything else. It stopped being a working product when we excluded the public testimony.
What else is included that nobody really talked about?
Well, I have to say the original draft, the 16 points that he had, I think we heard testimony on all that. It's just right there toward the end when we started deleting things and adding things that the structure of the committee kind of fell apart there.
Now, the committee was going to look at expansion as well as reform. Is there any expansion in this bill?
There is absolutely no expansion. Actually, it's more of a cost containment bill. Or, it's not a bill, I should back up. It's more of a cost containment report. It's to expand managed care and to do some other things to make the Mo Health Net more effective and more economical.
How will they contain the costs?
Put everybody into managed care, and there's still some dispute over whether that's really a cost containment. It does very well in some sections of the state. It does not quite so well in other sections of the state. So Senator Schaaf was opposed to it, but they want to expand Mo Health Net and managed care to all Mo Health Net, which, I'm fine with that. Go ahead and let's give it a try. It's all about providing service and giving people health care.
What parts of the state does it work best in, and what parts does it not work well in?
It works best basically along the I-70 corridor and up north of Kansas City into St. Joe. Those are the more densely populated areas. Those are where the access to health care is there. When you get into some of the more rural areas, they don't have the access, so the managed care really has a hard time operating there.
You and your fellow Democrats in the final meeting walked out briefly. Why?
Because we spent all this time taking public testimony. We assumed that the major issue that we needed to talk about was expansion, and it wasn't included in the report. We were concerned that the chairman would just have a little discussion at the end of the meeting, and it wouldn't be focused on the way that it should be. So we walked out and said we'd be back when it came time to talk about expansion. And after we left, we decided to draft what we wanted in the report, 4 bullet points, not recommendations for the committee to the General Assembly, but just what had occurred during the public testimony. And it's almost astounding that we couldn't even get what actually occurred in public testimony submitted into the report.
So would you say offhand, given the political makeup of the legislature in 2014, the Medicaid expansion has any chance at all based on your experience with this committee?
Well, I've been around long enough to know that everything's got a chance if you file a bill. But based on my experience with this committee, I don't think the bill will originate in the Senate. We'll wait and see what the House passes and sends over to us. It's going to be an uphill fight.
So none of the 4 points that you suggested made it into the final report?
None.
Any commentary from the committee as they rejected it?
Really none. You could see Senator Schaaf was, he's opposed to any Medicare expansion. If we were to get our points, he wanted his point. So that's kind of the trade-off that we get into. It got more into political bickering than any substantive discussion.
would you anticipate political consequences?
No, no. I mean, this is a body that we debate and we discuss very passionately. And at the end of the day, you know, you're still friends, you're still colleagues. So this is just one item where we don't agree, and we realize that, and there'll be other fights.
Fact is, we're recording this in November, and it's a long time until the middle of May. A lot of things can happen, and before the legislature meets, the governor wants to have a meeting with the committees of the House and the Senate that have looked at this issue. Does the governor have any muscle that can make any changes that might change things around for the members of the Democratic Party, and as it relates to this issue or this report?
You know, the governor does wield some power, and you know, I think the governor has expressed a concern and a willingness to work with people on this issue. But you know, there's going to have to be some serious conversation to get this off a dead center.
What do you give its chances to get it off dead center?
It's going to be an uphill fight. I don't give it even chances of passing Medicaid expansion this year.
Now, was this the kind of thing in this committee that produces any partisan alienation that's going to automatically build some walls that might make it harder to get anything done at all during the 14th session?
I don't think so. Number one, we've already had this fight. We had this fight last year. This is just a rehash, and everybody during the committee hearings, everybody was open and willing to talk, which gave me some hope that we could, you know, get something accomplished. Probably not everything that I wanted, but some kind of compromise. I'm pretty disappointed today. I think that the room for compromise is very much diminished today.
Lawmakers in the Missouri General Assembly work in a building that has seen many war heroes pass through its hallowed halls and are even featured in its priceless artwork. Senate Communications correspondent Brad Bayshore shows us how the Capitol honors our veterans.
U.S. Brigadier General John J. Pershing grew up as a boy in Laclede County in south central Missouri and became one of our nation's legendary generals. His likeness is featured in the Pershing Gallery, just steps away from the Senate chamber. This depiction showcases General Pershing as General of the Armies in 1919, the highest-ranking general in American history. Over in the House chamber, a vast painting by Charles Hofbauer called The Glory of Missouri in War depicts the unquenchable fire of Missouri courage and the strenuous activity of Missouri efficiency. It was donated by France to honor a Missouri battle unit from World War I. There are many exhibits located in the Missouri State Museum on the first floor of the state capitol that also honor our war heroes. In 1919, the General Assembly designated an exhibit gallery known as the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall, now referred to as History Hall. The exhibit features Missouri's cultural history, including stories of the Civil War in Missouri. Part of the first floor also features the Missouri Veterans Gallery. Opened in 2007, this gallery honors veterans of the Show Me State and rotates artifacts used in conflicts from the Seminole War to Operation Enduring Freedom, so visitors can get a close-up look at these war mementos. Outside the state capitol, one of the many tributes featured on its surrounding grounds are 8 tall marble monuments that stand as a memorial to those who served in our country's great wars, starting with the Mexican-American War. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Brad Bayshore.
And that's our show for this month. If you have any questions about the legislation or the committees that appeared in this program, please visit our website at senate.mo.gov. There you'll find the contact information for the 34 members of the Missouri Senate, as well as the Senate's newsroom website. I'm Jennifer Yapel reporting for the Missouri Senate.
And I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives. If you have any questions regarding anything going on in the Missouri House, you can visit our website at house.mo.gov. For all of us with Missouri Legislative Update, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again next month as we continue to move closer to the start of the 2014 legislative session. Thanks for watching.